I'm going to talk about my aunts on the Veater side. So first we'll talk about Aunt Terry. She's right here. She lived in Kanab, and so every time we would drive to Salina for the 4th of July, we'd always stop in Kanab and we would visit Aunt Terry, Aunt Arva, and Aunt Bonnie. Aunt Terry, we would drive to her. She lived in a trailer and she was super proud of it. She was always adding on to it. She added like a little sunroom, and then she had this grassy area where she had a hammock, and then she had a garden, and she was really proud of her garden. And one of my favorite memories of Aunt Terry was I was like napping in her hammock, and she brought out fresh cherry tomatoes from her garden. And I hate tomatoes, especially cherry tomatoes, because of the pop when you bite into them. And she didn't know that. And I'm like sleeping in the hammock, and she comes and she puts a cherry tomato in my mouth and she says, "Try this tomato from my garden. They're delicious." And I didn't have it in me to tell her I didn't like them. And so I ate the tomato, I chewed it, and I tried not to make a face, and she was so excited about it that I just never could tell her the truth. And so that's like my funny memory of her. And then she also she had so much jewelry. And as she started to get older, it was like too heavy for her to wear, and she had all this turquoise. And she gave me this turquoise necklace. And then she also gave me this little bracelet that someday I'll give to Keely, because it's small. It doesn't fit me. It's meant for a young girl. So I'm excited to give this to Keely someday. That's from Aunt Terry. But one thing about Aunt Terry that I always appreciated was when my relationship with my dad got really hard and just a lot of people kind of stopped talking to me. She never was a part of the drama. I always knew that I could still show up to her house and she would welcome me with open arms. She never brought it up. We never talked about it, but she never made me feel like I couldn't come and see her. I was really grateful about that. Aunt Bonnie, she was always working when we were driving through, so we'd always go visit her at work. And then Aunt Arva, I have another here. Aunt Arva and Uncle Lou, they also lived in a different part of Kanab, also in a trailer, and we would always stop by their trailer first because it's right as you come into Kanab. And Aunt Arva, she had this special gift of making you feel like you were her favorite person on the planet. And people with that gift are so special. Not everybody can do that. But she always made me feel like I was her favorite person to ever come visit her. And I'm sure everybody who came to visit her left feeling that way. But she had this gift of making you feel like you were the most important person to her, her favorite person. And she had this gift of turning what one person might call trash into treasure. She had all these dolls that she would get, and people would think they were junk, but she would work on them and she would make them so special. And then every time you would come visit her, you would leave with a doll, and she would always tell you, "This is my most special doll. I worked so hard on it, and since you're so special, I'm going to give you this special doll." And it was always really cool because you knew when you went to go see Aunt Arva, you were going to leave with something precious and so special. My favorite thing, though, that she ever gave me that I've gotten to hold on to is this necklace. And it's like, again, somebody's trash. It became her treasure. And it's a broken brooch on the back. And she put it on a chain to make it a necklace. And she gave this to me as I started to get older and outgrew the dolls. She gave me jewelry, and I'm so grateful that I still have this. Now, Uncle Lou, what I love so much about him is how much he loved my Aunt Arva. And I will never forget the time when it was after she passed away. He was having such a hard time. And me and Francisco, we were just dating, but we were coming up to Utah, and we drove through Kanab, and we stopped to see Uncle Lou. And he talked to us probably for an hour about how much he loved Aunt Arva and missed her, and how he was making changes in his life to make sure that he would be able to see her again. And I remember he had quit smoking, and he had quit some things, and he'd gotten baptized again, and he was working towards going to go through the temple so that he could have her work done, do his work, because he was not going to hold her back from living with God again, and he was going to be with her, and that was the most important thing to him. And their love was so special and was such an example to me, and I'm so grateful for it. And then there's Aunt Maureen, and my favorite thing about Aunt Maureen was, one, she lived in Arizona for a while, so when we were all working at Big O, she would work at Big O with us sometimes. But my favorite memory of her was she had dentures, and when Donna died, it was such a hard day, her funeral, and the funeral had ended. We had done the graveside service, and we'd come back to the church for the luncheon after, and they had all of the Veater cousins line up, and we were going to take a picture, all of us, and we were all like crying and sad that day, and we're like having a hard time smiling for this picture. So she pulls out her dentures and starts making some joke about no teeth, and you just see her gums, and she's talking when she's shaking her dentures around, and we just all started laughing so hard, and we needed that laugh so bad that day. That's Aunt Maureen. Aunt Annie, she's still alive, but my favorite thing, my memory of her is when I was young. She's my aunt, but because of my age with my second cousins, she always felt she was their grandma, and so she would always include me and have me call her Grandma Annie, since my grandparents had already passed. And so she would have like tea parties at her house with Jamin and Jade, and she'd have me come and be a part of it. So when I was young, I called her Grandma Annie.